doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
Hubert, I think this is as good a time as any to bring you in. I think the proposition of attracting investment has already been raised, certainly by Nathan just now. I don't want to single you out. You are the one person who was not with us in Cape Town, and we greatly missed you, but we hope that in next time you'll be able to join us. We had a very interesting conversation post the workshop, and it's why we felt it was so important to bring you into this discussion. As the CEO and chairman of the Africa Investor Group, clearly an institution that's very relevant to what we've just discussed with Concha and Nathan, what strategic investments and partnerships do you believe are crucial to position South Africa as a leader in zero-emission fuels and clean technologies in the shipping and trucking sectors, but perhaps more broadly as well, especially considering the global shift, and we can argue it's not happening fast enough, but the global shift towards sustainable energy solutions? Hubert, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rob and colleagues, and congratulations on a great white paper and what was obviously a very successful workshop in South Africa. I think, just to sort of address your question there, I mean, absolutely positioning South Africa as a leader in net zero emission fuels and clean technologies for the shipping and trucking sector is the opportunity of our time for all the reasons that we've heard and that you so articulately lay out in your report. But I think one of the things that we also really need to start with in terms of our level of consciousness around this is that the energy transition is a mega trend. And as a mega trend, it needs real multi-billion-dollar investment platforms and mega funds to really deliver South Africa's $20 billion plus portfolio of green hydrogen projects and even larger opportunity set around general renewables. And on the continent, we sort of tend to have private equity funds that are sort of sub $1 billion for infrastructure. So we absolutely need to begin to sort of elevate our mind to how do we have a very different relationship with the global institutional pools of capital. So we absolutely love what First Movers Coalition is doing, getting those demand signals out to the corporates, getting those demand signals out to the producers. But we think that there's a real opportunity and a need to continue to create emphasis around how do we communicate the opportunity in the best and most structured fashion to the global institutional investment community, that 200 to 300 trillion pool of capital that is going to be the only pool of capital really going to be big enough to drive these ambitious projects. Now, as a sort of tailwind at the political level, we absolutely welcome the African Union's Nairobi Declaration, which was launched last year, championed by President Ruto from Kenya, which is really Africa's green industrial investment deal, sort of aligned in many respects and philosophy to the market signals that were sent by the Inflation Reduction Act to institutional investors and by the European Net Zero Industry Act, similarly sending out a very strong market signal to the institutional investment community about investing in climate as an investable asset class. And we have taken the Nairobi Declaration as a very credible market signal to us as the investment community that the continent will really occupy this leading position globally on green industrialization through green industrialization hub strategies. And one thing that really gets us excited is that underpinning that sort of big, broad political endorsement is that Africa is now working on, through the African Union, establishing African green industrial infrastructure as a globally competitive, investable asset class. And we think that's absolutely crucial because we know that there's a significant shortfall. We've seen in your report that the trillions that are required and the very short and low portion of that actually comes to Africa. If you look at the institutional capital that was deployed to renewable energy in the last 20 years, well, year 2000 to the year 2020, that was about $2.8 trillion, of which less than 2% came to Africa. So whilst we have these initiatives, it's really important for us to take a bit of a different posture around how we mobilize private capital. Historically, it's been very much the preserve of the multilateral development banks, but we've realized, they've got so many other important areas that they're working on that perhaps it's been a challenge for them to deliver to the level that we need. As you know, private capital mobilization, through the multilateral development banks is supposed to be, for every $1 of development finance that they provide, they're supposed to be able to mobilize $10 of institutional capital, of private capital. But unfortunately, that, according to the G20, is only materialized into a $1 of MDB finance sort of mobilizes 20 to 38 cents. So, we continue to encourage these types of initiatives, which really create an investable universe by taking these different asset classes and these renewable energy structures and strategies and saying, how can these become more of an asset allocation opportunity, so we don't have to look at individual projects so deeply. We can rather just say it's now been established as an investable asset class. There are bankable and or investable offtake agreements that can de-risk the transaction, so we can make allocations to that. We as asset owners can then send the right signals to the investment management and the fund management community and the developers that they can actually rely on us with significantly increased pools of capital to be able to accomplish those particular goals. So we actually believe that there's a really good opportunity for South Africa to really position itself as a really investable opportunity. But there are a number of things that we need to see happen first to really be able to unlock that. I think I think you've mapped out a number of these in your white paper. Obviously we need to, on the investability side, deal with some of those historic legacy impediments, such as obviously the chronic load shedding issue, the need for massive investments in grid transmission, port and rail infrastructure, and of course back to the policies. We need policies that really can fast track permitting for projects, and of course the wider spread adoption of standardized investable offtake agreements, which and recharacterize risk, I think are going to be really important for us. But let me just sort of close by saying that we believe that this is the time for South Africa to pivot and collaborate more with the institutional investment community to really invest at scale in renewable value chain infrastructure that will really power the production of renewable energy for zero emission fuels and clean technologies for the shipping and trucking sectors. Perhaps let me stop there, Rob.
I liked, Hubert, that earlier you called out the pool of capital, private sector capital, that will need to be mobilized. So maybe just to double click on that, how is your organization, the Africa Investor Group, leveraging international and regional financing mechanisms to support the development of green hydrogen projects in South Africa? And what role in particular, and I think you already alluded to it earlier, do you see private sector investment playing in this regard? Over to you, Hubert.
No, thank you very much, Robin. I completely agree with my colleagues' view. We've really got to sort of transition our mind to this whole sort of scale and ecosystem approach. But I think within that, we also have to sort of think about the different roles that different players in the constituency need to play going forward. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the roles that they played historically are going to position them well to have that private capital mobilization, that scale role into the future. Now, as you know, Africa Investor is an institutional investment platform that really works with the largest institutional allocators, representing that 200 to 300 trillion that I mentioned to you, that have an interest in infrastructure and green infrastructure globally. So, what are we doing, particularly as it relates to this particular area? So we're leading with global institutional investors, working with African institutional investors and the African Union, the African Green Infrastructure Investment Bank platform. And that platform is specifically designed to marry, support, and really drive Africa's just energy transition and crowd in African and global pension and sovereign wealth fund institutional investments, as well as portfolio companies as universal owners. We're really driving the participation of all of our assets, both public and private, to really help position African green industrial investment, particularly around green hydrogen as one of the really key areas. And this is done quite uniquely, as I mentioned earlier, through institutional investor public partnerships, where we're now able to work more directly with governments to really look at these opportunities on a more of a programmatic basis, align the pools of capital, and then see if we have that expertise within our portfolio companies to be able to fast track our ability to deploy capital to those particular projects under a very predictable contractual and regulatory arrangement with the respective governments, South Africa included. In fact, we're looking very seriously now at the Bukabai green hydrogen project in the Northern Cape. We've had a number of engagements with the government there and the provincial government. We think that is a unique opportunity for us to not only allocate to green hydrogen in South Africa, but also bring on board our thesis around the just transition and the role that long-term capital can play through place-based impact investing. So we're really looking at that Bukabai project as an opportunity, as an already designated sort of a presidential special economic zone, to drive a whole ecosystem and invest in a whole value chain ecosystem through a green industrial city framework, where we can actually then bring our portfolio companies to create those green jobs and co-locate around that particular green hydrogen project. As Nathan mentioned, it's catalytic and it's interdependent and interconnected with so many other areas of the economy. And I think one of the key areas that we're really keen to continue to work, of course, with the First Movers Coalition, as well as the Sustainable Markets Initiative that was launched at Davos. I chair their Africa Council, and we're really saying, if we have offtake agreements that are really talking to the private sector, we probably need to think about how can we create something that's more investable as an offtake agreement that sends that direct market signal to the investment community, so we can then say this is much more of an asset allocation opportunity. So exciting times ahead, lots happening, Rob, but in the interest of time, perhaps I'll stop there. Thank you.
One theme that came up during the workshop, and it's certainly something that came up as well during today's session with all of you, is there's an almost Dickensian quality to the situation in South Africa. What I mean by that is, half of the time we talk about the tremendous opportunities and the tremendous potential for the country to become a powerhouse in, for example, green energy and all the derivatives that can be built from it. And the other half of the time we talk about, of course, the fairly sizable challenges that we have to overcome. And it was one workshop participant in Cape Town who said it, I think, best. It's only an opportunity if you can seize it. What is the key challenge that we need to overcome together to make sure that we actually seize that opportunity and unlock that potential?
Thank you very much, Rob. I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record here, so apologies in advance for that. But I think it really comes down to the ability to mobilize the trillions. We already know that cannot come from concessional finance. If you combine all the concessional finance, that's 1.5 trillion. Africa alone has got $3 trillion worth of nationally determined contribution projects. So I think the key challenge for us, which is a huge opportunity, is to really strategically engage African pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, to work strategically with the global 300 trillion pool of institutional assets to establish African green industrial infrastructure as a globally competitive and investable asset class.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.